So I'm here with Harry de Bont, who is currently working on his new company, Open Collective, and we are going to have a discussion about different practices in the workplace, different philosophies around work, maybe a bit of holocracy and
Yep.
a bit of purpose, and yeah, just see where the conversation takes us. So welcome,
Okay.
Harry.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Greg.
Um, yeah, so maybe we could maybe we could start off with just hearing a little bit about your background and then how you came to the point of starting Open Collective.
Sure. Yeah. So my background educationally started with electrical engineering back in the 80s of the
Mm,
last century. And because I was always tinkering with stuff, like a real engineer. So that was a good start. And as soon as I finished my education, I met with somebody working at an IT company, and he said, "Well, why don't you come working for us?" And I didn't even send a letter or anything. I just rolled there, and so I had worked with computers, and that was enough for them to hire me and start working with computers for 7 years in the industry, like breweries, refineries, the control of bridges, yeah, like the industrial stuff, right?
mm,
And after 7 years, I noticed like I really enjoyed working together with people, and most of the projects that I did uh, were the bigger projects. So that was good enough. But the bridge one was just on my own, and I hated it. I was like, oh, actually, so that dawned on me that I really like working with people. So I'm like, why don't I do something with that? And I spoke to a good friend of mine, and that's my partner in crime now, Robert. And he said, "Yeah, I don't understand that you're doing technical stuff. I always saw you as a hobby psychologist.
mm,
So why don't you do something with that?" And that was like the kick in the butt that I needed to go and study psychology.
mm,
And I did so in the evening, in the free evenings that I had for 3 years. And I was like, at some point, like, really enthusiastic about it, and I wanted to do something with it, not just be a bookworm.
mm,
And I started to apply for jobs, but of course I didn't finish my education yet, and I didn't have experience, so they didn't go well. But then my own company was looking for a career coach, applied for that, and I got hired. And
mm,
I changed fields from IT to HR. And in those days, the IT company was really growing fast. So we had to hire more career coaches, and I became a manager. And from a manager, uh, I had to set up a HR department
mm.
and administration and secretaries, and like I had like 40, 50 people working for me at some point. And then I realized, what, like I really like working with people about personal development, and there was a lot of politics involved, and
Mm,
they didn't go very well. There was a lot of power play, irritation, frustration, like in big companies.
mm,
And I collided with my boss then, and that ended up in me starting on my own for myself, with some help from the payment that I got out of it. And
mm,
I started my own company, and doing talent development and organizational advice to other companies.
mm,
And that's about 11 years ago. And I did that with a lot of motivation and enthusiasm. until I realized it was kind of frustrating that, I equipped people with a lot of knowledge, but, they couldn't really develop all of that
Mm,
or execute all of that because the environment didn't change much, right? So,
mm,
and I'm like, if I want to see that, how that is, the experiment, I have to do it for myself. And
mm,
that's when the idea came to fruition, like that I have to start my own IT company and create the culture that I want. And, the way I've been thinking that a company could be very effective.
mm.
Yeah. So a long background.
No, no, it's yeah, it's perfect, and it
Yeah.
makes total sense why yeah, why you would want to then
Yeah.
move into.
It's sort of, yeah, it feels like going full circle, actually, like, applying so I've not done much with my technical skills in the last 10 years, maybe 20 years.
Mm,
But it's not, it's not my main drive, but it is a drive.
mm.
And I'm really enthusiastic to get back in the field there. Yeah.
Okay, so you're combining basically all of your expertise into one thing.
Yeah, and
Almost,
interest. Yeah, that's right.
nice, nice. Yeah, I think that's somewhere where we meet is this on doing things in the workplace differently,
Yeah.
using learnings from psychology to make the workplace a better place, to I guess bring more harmony between people as well. Um, what are what are some of the what are some of the things you'd most like to see in the workplace that you didn't necessarily see in yeah, in previous places that you worked in?
Um, so not necessarily didn't see, but
Yeah,
like they're sort of half implemented always.
yeah,
I think for one, like a professional or just any person actually should be really responsible for themselves, for their
mm,
own development. And of course, there's reasons to say no to something, like if it doesn't make sense or it's really dangerous for the company, but it doesn't happen, normally. So I think just giving people freedom to experiment or explore whatever they want, as long as it is related to the work that they're doing.
mm,
I think that's something I would like to try out, like to just give people responsibility there
yeah,
and to stimulate them actually to do so. Because if you haven't done that for a long time, that will people have to get used to that as well. So
yeah. That's true. I think that's the yeah, that's an interesting one on the freedom thing. I think um, this is something I see as well, is that it takes a while for people to really understand that they have that freedom or that they can take that freedom, because
yeah,
um, I think everyone is so used to these implicit rules or implicit
right.
roles and things
Right.
you can do
Yeah.
in specific roles. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we just before we started, we were talking about habits, but that has to do with habits as well. Like
Mm,
the habit of just waiting for a cue from outside, like what's the next thing I have to do, and looking at your boss or at your colleagues or maybe even
yeah.
your partner
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
who who is in charge,
Yeah. Yeah.
of you. I mean, that's people give that away a lot, and it makes sense from like how we're wired. Like not everybody can be a leader and can be boss,
Yeah.
in a natural environment. But I think we're living in a modern society where everybody is actually responsible for their own development,
Yeah.
and and giving that freedom will create that tension. Like, okay, what now? I'm confused, right? So what am I to do? I wish somebody told me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, and the other thing is that what really struck me in the beginning of my career career counseling that I did at the IT company is that people are are also not used. They're very conscious about their work professionally, but not so much about their own professional development. Like thinking about yourself is not like a normal habit.
Yeah.
I think it's changing nowadays for the better, but you know, it could still be stimulated, like, you know, getting feedback and thinking about it in a way, how can I use this for my own advantage? And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think the the feedback thing is a tricky one as
Yeah,
well.
definitely.
Yeah, because I know you mentioned this not like having a non-triggering workplace, but
Right.
feedback itself
Right.
is almost the most triggering triggering thing you can
Yeah,
get, right?
definitely.
It's
Yeah.
a real skill to learn how to give it and how to receive it as well.
Yeah, like, you know, I'm um, a fan of talking about courage. It takes courage to, you know, apply these new behaviors, and it takes courage to take feedback as something that will improve you,
Yeah,
in a way that you're feeling your stomach might be turning from, you know, this person doesn't like me, or he doesn't think I'm good enough, and with that feeling, just set it aside and think that, okay, this might be useful for me, and this
yeah,
might come from a good place actually, that they want to help me, even though it doesn't feel that way, right?
yeah.
And that's the struggle that you're probably referring to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think I think it's really easy to go into defensiveness, and
yeah.
when you get caught in defensiveness, yeah, it's so hard to come out of that and to
Right.
take the different perspective. And I think on an
Yeah.
individual level, and I also notice it on a group level, like if we receive feedback, say as a company, it can either go to like this, okay, what did we learn, or it can go to this like, hang on a minute, hang on.
Who's
Yeah.
crazy here?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Mm,
Yeah, I think so. I think it is, and of course, you still have to, you know, check the validity of your
yeah,
feedback. With people think they have to go from defensive to surrender with feedback, and that's
yeah,
not the case. It's
yeah,
like you have to really check it, like the other day, I'm still struggling with it too. Like the other day, I was meeting with my partners, and I did some evaluation of recruitment tools, and my partner said, well, you're going everywhere with this, and we need to talk about this. And I
mm,
spent like 4 hours making the evaluation. You know, I put some time and energy in it, and I felt it in my stomach, like, ah, shit, why is he saying that?
yeah,
And I think, and then just saying, okay, it's okay to talk about it. Let's do that. And then it still doesn't feel good, and
mm,
until um, he mentioned that, you know, I put some tools on there that were obviously like just for communication and not for recruitment, and it was like Quora or something. And I'm like, yeah, but it, you know, recruitment is not just using recruitment tools. It's also
mm,
about your, you know, how your company is known out in the outside world, and if you're present there. And sometimes people rather, you know, trust that those real stories than
yeah,
the recruitment or selling points that you're putting out there.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you're probably not gonna have a lot of people responding to that, but I think it's still important. And especially when you have a story to tell, right? If you just want to do the numbers and have a lot of turnover and that's it, maybe that's not so important. But I think
mm,
for a company like yours and the one I'm starting, it's important to tell your story. And so
yeah,
that was the
absolutely.
background, and that was really a good discussion in the end, and I understood he wanted to um, make progress, and he was worried about like, and And that's usually the case. I can go, on a tangent.
Yeah, yeah.
And my interests are very broad, so he's right to keep me in on track there
Oh,
as well.
so he was coming from the perspective of he wants to kind of move things forward, and
Yeah.
perhaps if we
So
could go to a
that's the
flat approach.
positive.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And after talking about this, we got both. I got
yeah.
him to understand my point, and we got progress. So yeah, really
Yeah,
good.
well, that's yeah, that's interesting, and that you got both. And I think I I think in doing this type of work, that so this is kind of like a polarity, or like integrating two different things, and um, I've noticed that it's important to find ways to like take both messages from each person rather than just one is
Right.
right and one is wrong. I mean, sometimes it is one is right and one is wrong, but
Sure,
in
sure.
general,
Yeah,
getting this balance
yeah,
between what's true in both cases.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think let's say it this way, like being kind and being and keeping everybody a friend won't make you win business in the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
have to be out there and you have to be a hunter as well. And you have to show both sides, right?
Yeah. That's
It doesn't work if you're just, yeah, it's so nice here. Come join us and have a cup of tea.
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's partly. Actually, I don't have that much experience. I've only run this one organization, so I'm not sure if this is the case in others that don't use, for instance, Holocracy. But I've noticed
Mhm.
like there is a lot of tension, because you do, like this being nice and being the hunter, you do have to have both, and then
Right. Right.
that can be difficult to bring out these other sides of you that
Yeah.
you'd rather stay away from, maybe.
Yeah, and I think, well, talking about that, like, and we talked about this before, but that's not on record. um, so there's like you have this zone where your body is in flow, and you're hunting for something because
Mm,
you're engaged and you're focused,
yeah,
and then after a while, if there's too much of that, you get in a stressful
yeah,
situation,
yeah.
and it's really hard to feel that happening when you're in that. I'm like, wow, this feels so good, and I'm gonna do it all day, and I'm gonna do it all week, and then somewhere you
Mm,
crash, of course.
mm,
And I think that's the balance everybody has to find there.
yeah, yeah,
And that's on an individual level, but that goes for a company as well. If you're, as a leader of a company, like stresses everybody out, yeah, stuff is going to happen there.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Because I'm very interested in feedback. To go back to the previous point, because um, like we as a company, we're learning, and we're getting better at it. But I think that, yeah, I think that's somewhere where we can improve, is like how to give honest, open feedback, how to receive it,
Right.
on individual level with your colleagues, but also
Right.
um, with the people that you work for as well.
Right.
Receive
Right.
feedback. Um, uh, yeah. Do you have any thoughts about how you might start to implement that, or how you might start to think about having more of that in your?
Yeah, I think like so you're using holocracy as well,
Yeah.
but like making again, we're going to write the horse is named habit again. Like you have to start doing it first before you put it to the test, right? So if you
Mm,
have a team, giving each other feedback is the first thing to do, and
yeah.
make a habit out of it.
Yeah.
Like do it every meeting,
Yeah.
and do it in a good way, like
Mm,
checking in with each other so you know what's going on also. So is this person yesterday we were meeting with three, and one of them at the end, like I was like, wow, I'm so enthusiastic, we're going somewhere and we're finally
mm,
doing it. And one of us was sitting there. I'm like, he must be either seeing something bad in this idea or he must be tired. And if I don't ask about it, I could go to bed. I'm like, maybe we should do it with 2 instead of 3. you know it's so important to know
Mm,
where somebody is at, and checking in with people as well, like
yeah,
who are they, what situation are they in, because feedback that you receive is not just what you say, it's also what you see, right, and what you hear. So it's
yeah,
really important to know each other, and start to trust each other, with the good intention that people have,
mm,
and feel that as a habit, like, okay, and then build up the courage to ask for feedback, and
yeah,
that's really important. If it's with unknown people, it's sometimes really hard. You could either go somewhere from, yeah, no, I'm worth nothing, to, I don't know this guy, he might be worthless, but that's not a good attitude. Like, either reject yourself or the other. It
yeah,
doesn't work that way. You have to really be in a good relationship with people, a trustworthy relationship, to do something with feedback, because there's
yeah,
translation needed, and you have to
yeah.
sometimes go into the nitty gritty of what you mean with this, and why do you say it like that, and whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I have that feeling as well that it feels like there has to be that sort of base level of safety before proper, like before people
Yeah.
actually saying what they really think, um,
Yeah.
which you kind of need for like honest feedback, right?
Right. Right.
I have the feeling, because we have like a core team, and
Mhm.
then within that team, there's definitely a level of safety. But then we also work with a lot of freelancers, and
Right.
then there's this difficulty between like how how yeah how do you make a space safe with people that are like say relatively new or maybe not fully invested in the project because
Right.
they're just yeah
Yeah, that's important. I believe so. And you have to really invest in that, right?
yeah
And that's why I talk about habits. If you don't do that, hmm, it's harder. Yeah.
yeah
And I also think, um, yeah, like putting the blame away is important. Like, either I'm not good or you have the feedback wrong. You have to get that out of the way. Just,
mm,
it's interesting to figure out what's not flowing, in a company. It's very interesting, to get the company flowing. And
yeah
if you have everybody on that curiosity, that's a way better, state to be in than, be on edge, or like, oh, this is going to be bad, or
yeah
this, I'm not going to like this.
yeah
And yeah, and I think if you have a habit of that, like, okay, afterwards, I felt really good because I found something out of myself and I'm improving it now and it works better for me. And if you have that experience in your pocket, then you can apply that for a next time, right?
yeah that's true
I,
yeah
when I started doing HR work, career coaching, I was sitting down with somebody and she said, what's something you would like to develop? And I'm like, yeah, that's a good question. I'm like, I don't know how people sit next to each other and just don't talk about anything but just the weather or the dog. And how do you do that? I'm like, and we practiced that then.
mm,
And since then, of course, I'm not the best in it because it's not me. I'd like to go deep and I think about stuff and then talk about the weather. Just it's like, it's
you
weird.
don't like small talk
I don't like it. I think I'm not good at it. That's
right
why. And and always think about that as an example of, like, if you learn something and you ask for feedback, yeah, that really works in your, advantage.
so
Yeah.
you practiced like sitting and not saying
Yeah, 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 and just saying, like, okay, what's the weather tomorrow, and you start to laugh because it's about nothing. Of course, you can, and then I realized, because it's nothing, you can say anything. And then it becomes interesting again, like making quirky remarks and making jokes, and
Yeah,
then it became interesting again.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and that was fun.
yeah,
So I think if you're curious and see the fun of it, yeah, then feedback. But I do agree, it could be very scary, right? Especially and talking about a company, especially if you hold off this feedback until the end of the year and you sit down and it's going to happen now and your
then it's not
salary is going
scary.
to
Yeah,
depend on it. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a
that
terrible way.
that's awful, isn't it?
That's the worst way there is. And
Yeah, because yeah, I guess the longer you wait with with feedback, especially with something important or emotional, then it builds up to this massive scary thing, doesn't it?
yeah, it does. And I've been on the other side of the table. Like I was like, it was my responsibility to gather feedback for the end of the year discussion,
Yeah.
and was so glad to have something, and I kept it like, wow, I'm going to keep this until the end of the year. And that's so silly, right? Because he could have done something with it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but if a lot of
Yeah,
companies still do that, but that's the worst.
that's true. It's like you're just holding on to like a lesson that could be learned like
Yeah.
12 months earlier, but you just hold on to it for a year.
Yeah, that's silly,
And
and
you
that's
also
not the way you should do it.
yeah, and
Yeah.
you also kind of take it out of the context because the lesson happened in that time.
Right.
So the learning would probably happen better within that context at that time. But then,
Yeah, and the context is totally lost,
yeah,
and the person might not even remember it,
yeah,
like, and he's like, I don't know this, and then so what's the use? So you can say, well, that's why you don't get a salary raise, but but there's not much gain in that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, true.
cool. Yeah.
So, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think if we're talking about like companies like yours and mine, like being open and actively asking for feedback is the sort of the basis for innovation and getting better and better. And
Yeah,
if you don't do that, I'm like, we're innovating, but you're not really open. Yeah, that doesn't work.
no, yeah,
And
absolutely.
you have to really do that together as a group, as a collective, and have that intention. And that's why we named our company that way, right?
Hmm.
Because we really want to be, we realize we're just a startup and we're going to make mistakes, but we want to be better and learn and be a real good company at it. But
Yeah,
not right away. That's not possible.
no,
And
of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and I like that statement too. Like, you're gonna make mistakes, and that's okay. And if you just let it pass and make those mistakes again and again, that's not okay.
exactly. Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
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 right.
yeah. To make mistakes as a startup is absolutely necessary because
Yeah,
otherwise,
we're gonna do that, and you've probably done it. Yeah.
oh, oh, I've done it, baby.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Like me and Clayton, yeah, my co-founder, we have made all the mistakes,
Right.
but
So,
yeah, we learn from them, and then and yeah, and then we just yeah got better and better after learning from each one. But you
yeah.
don't really get to start perfect.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's really important to, like, also have a sort of a collective memory there,
Yeah,
because as a startup, you usually start with fewer people than you end up, and it's interesting to transfer the why of the how. It's
yeah,
like, why do we do this? Because we learned this and that, and it doesn't work that way. And if you tell those stories, um, and you could also learn from that again if you got new people with the company who improve it even more. But if you don't tell it, it's like a rule, right? It's like a dead rule, and
yeah.
there's no why to it. And I think that's yeah, it's really important to keep that alive.
Hmm. That's it. Yeah, that's an interesting point. we like so we're also, because we're working with for purpose organizations, we're trying to focus on this why, but I think this is a
Right.
separate, this is a different kind of why that you're talking about, which is the more like um in giving a rule or a way that you do something, which is a
Yeah.
how you say why you're doing that so that people actually take it
Right, but
rather
it
than
is it's yeah, it's not really directly related to the
yeah,
purpose of the company, but it's not unrelated,
it's
right?
not unrelated. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Because you want to be effective in your purpose, and effectiveness is a sort of a general rule for every company. If you're not effective, you're not successful.
yeah,
And the execution of your purpose is depending on how well you've organized it, how well your execution is actually.
yeah.
And it's not like possible to, buy a big rule book and have the execution
No,
perfectly right away. You have
no,
to sort of dial that in while doing so.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so this, yeah, I think that's maybe a good way to go into discussion around, well, I guess this deeper sense of why, and I think because you've already kind of given us that sense of the purpose, right? It's to,
Yeah.
yeah, to sort of see the flourishing in an organization of these types of practices, this cycle that you learned in psychology, right? Would you
Hmm.
say that's the kind of purpose behind your company, or is it something different? Would you frame it differently?
Yeah, I think like, so I studied motivation for a while as well. And, there's different levels of motivation.
Hmm.
And to have the freedom to find out what you're good at, right? That's one level, is
Yeah.
like just play around is fun for a while, and then when you have played
Hmm.
around enough, you want to be good at it. So that
Yeah.
I consider that one level. You have to have the freedom
Hmm.
to do so, and to find out what it is, and
Yeah.
then when you find out, really, make it better or improve yourself. So there's a level of pride in that, like, I'm really
Yeah.
good at this. And
Yeah.
then there's the level of connectedness with the people around you, with your clients,
Hmm.
with groups of people, maybe stakeholders, or I don't know, that you feel like really engaged with those people on a meaningful basis. So that's the second level of purpose, I would say. And then the third level is really rising from those both, is that you're adding something to the world which wasn't there before, and
Hmm.
people really like that. And you have to have all three of them, actually. And
That's
when we're talking about purpose,
yeah.
from Holacracy, they're only talking about the highest level, but you have to have the first two as well.
That's okay. So this is really interesting. So the so these three levels, they sit on top of each other, and then the first
Yeah.
level is this sense of play and being good at something, or
Yeah,
being
it's play first, and then because you're playing, you're getting good at it, right?
okay,
And yeah, that's the first one. Yeah.
okay, and then the second one is the connectedness.
Yeah.
Okay, sense of connectedness.
Yeah.
Why is sense of
I,
connectedness
I would say engagement, but
engagement?
that is also connecting with people with usually with the same value set, right? Like, you're like having a meaningful conversation with somebody that has
Hmm.
similar values. Yeah.
Who have similar values,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
okay, and that's also connected to being good at something, or mastery. Is that like, yeah, part of
Yeah, it's almost a flow.
yeah.
It's almost a flow. You're playing and you're getting good at stuff, and you're connecting with people that
Hmm.
want the same thing in life. And
Yeah.
then you're like, why don't we do something with what we can do. We, it's a
Yeah.
flow. How
Yeah.
can we
Yeah.
apply this? And then you get to the last level of meaning, when you really put energy in it and change the world a little bit,
Hmm.
to be recognized by other people. It's not talk anymore. It's really tangible. You can really see it, and then they're like, "Wow, how did you guys do this?" And then and they get involved, and they get feedback, and they stimulate more and more, and then you get in a flow as a company or as a group.
Yeah. That's
Because yeah,
yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, and that's the model I'm applying in my head,
Hmm.
like building this company, starting from the bottom, getting everybody to play first, feel free,
Yeah.
without fear, which is very important, not triggered by fear, like we
Yeah.
talked earlier about, and from that, like building it up to being really good at your job, and really liking the people around you, and
Yeah.
strengthening that, and from that really putting energy in that and changing your environment for the better. Yeah.
Hmm.
So if I say, what's the purpose of our company? Yeah, that's making the world a better place in that way.
In that way. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is really great because it's sort of I know that you have also read this reinventing organizations from Lalou, and
Yeah.
he
Yeah, I
talks
did.
about
Yeah.
the three areas is like the that teal organizations have, which is self-management,
Hmm.
self-managing teams, wholeness, and then the evolutionary purpose. And so this sounds like your model sounds a little bit of a description of how evolutionary purpose comes to be, something like
Yeah, I think so.
coming
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. So when I encountered this book, I was like, wow, there's a book about it. Somebody wrote a book about it, and
Mm.
I don't have to reinvent everything. So we discussed that with the partners, and we're like, we're gonna adopt Holacracy because of that,
Yeah.
because it really fits in there. Yeah.
And that's interesting that you mentioned that with Holocracy, they only focus on um the sort of highest layer in your model, but there's not.
Yeah.
And do you think that's a gap within Holocracy, or that's something that you have to sort of
No,
tend
it's in the habits, all
yeah.
right. So in the habits is that you sit down weekly or whatever your meeting frequency is, and you check in with each other. You start to take care of each other there,
Yeah.
in a way, but it's not very explicit.
Yeah.
It's more like, let's get that out of the way.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
far that I've seen it, and it should be on a deeper level. I think everybody should be conscious about these mechanisms, why they matter.
Yeah.
And I've studied evolutionary psychology for a while, and how we as tribe people won the game, right?
Yeah.
And that's because we're good at making weapons. So, and I'm going to translate what I just said
So we
into
should.
that. We're good at just playfully playing with sticks and stones, and
Mm.
suddenly I got an axe. That's how it happened. And not only that, I applied that with people I can trust,
Mm.
and that are meaningful to me, because some of them are family.
Yeah.
They feel akin, right? And we're here to procreate our gene pool, and that's the purpose.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't come from somewhere. It's really ingrained. I'm like, my stance is that if we are not conscious about our evolutionary background, we're going haywire sometimes, and we're doing
Mm.
really weird stuff. Just look at 2020, but it's still ongoing.
Yeah.
Really weird stuff is going to happen if we're not stepping up and be conscious about, okay, we changed our environment so much that we're no longer aligned with our own wiring from the inside. So we have to use our brain to consciously adjust
Yeah.
there to be still effective.
Mm.
and and I think that's not, it's not very complicated, but you have to work hard to do so.
Okay.
It's not simple though. Yeah.
Yeah. That's yeah, and that's an interesting question of how how does how does this project of building yeah, a workplace based on this these principles fit in with the larger crisis of the fact that we are becoming
Yeah.
more and more divorced from these natural habits or natural ways of
Right.
being.
Right. Yeah, it does fit in there, and I'm still breaking my head about it.
Yeah, yeah,
So I don't have the answers there, but I think we're not as intellectual as we think, and
yeah,
as soon as it becomes more complex, we just lose control. I
yeah,
think that's the simple statement
yeah,
there, and we have to really learn to do better there
yeah.
by really talking to each other about it, and you know, like we talked about feedback earlier, and on a a bigger scale in society, that is just listening to minorities, right? It's like,
Mm,
yeah, why are you feeling frustrated? Or, tell us about it. I want to understand. And
mm,
if you separate yourself from those points of feedback there, tension is going to grow and it's going to get ugly in the end.
yeah.
Like, like the yearly salary evaluation.
Mm,
You have to do it on daily basis. Just be people amongst each other and take each other seriously. And we're not doing that very well.
no.
Like people with money see people without money as a threat, like they're going to steal something, or that's not a good way to look
Yeah,
at the world.
yeah.
Or people of color are different, so they must be scary or whatever. Yeah.
Mm,
But I don't have all the answers there. But I see
no.
parallels there for sure.
Yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so I remember because I had a class with you one time when we were going through the model.
Right.
I guess we
Yeah.
and I remember, was there not five
Yeah,
levels?
there's 5 levels, yeah, in that model. Yeah.
But then here you only mentioned three.
Yeah, so if I want to keep it simple,
Oh,
I'm only
you
talking about
collapse it into
3.
three. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and some of them consist of 2 layers, and some of one, like
Yeah,
the purpose layer is just 1 layer, and the
yeah,
other one is 2 layers.
yeah.
So the first one is play and developing your capabilities. That's 2 layers, and the third one is like engaging and making choices based on your values. That's 1 level, and the second one is applying those values and executing them with, you put energy in it and
Hmm.
perseverance, and that's the second level of that one. And
Yeah.
they are relational, so
Okay.
it's like material relational meaning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And
Yeah.
so if you went into like a random company that wanted to get more of a sense of purpose, what would you start with? You would start with practices on play, right? Or how would that work?
Oh, so how I would go about it in a company that wants
Yeah.
to apply purpose? Yeah, I did so. What I
Mm,
do is interview the founders and go back to childhood. What were they interested? Like go back
mm,
to play there.
yeah.
What were you doing? What were you thinking? When were you excited? And sometimes that takes a while,
Yeah.
but when you get there and you see that that shine in their eyes come back instead of stress, and
Yeah.
then they start to realize that they've translated those interests and curiosities that they had into their businesses, but
Mm,
also their frustrations and their you know and that's when you get the purpose in there, because as a child you only have intentions to play and to be kind. It's not you know,
Yeah.
there's people that are not kind, but most of us are.
Yeah.
And that's how I do it. Yeah, just
Mm.
interview how is everybody has like also some pain in their youth, and it's like I want to do something with that and align the personal history and the personal tragedy with your purpose is very powerful.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
I it's if I take my own childhood as an example, I was really cut off from being connected to people because I didn't understand people as they seemed to understand each other. I was
Mm.
really, I was really worried about that, or not worried. I was really like baffled by it, I would say was the good word. Like for a long time, I thought I was just crazy.
Mm.
But then I found out that I much later, like when I was an adult, was viewing the world from the meaning. I was always asking the why question instead of just doing stuff and then
Mm.
relating to people and then, discovering the why. So it was just reversed with me. And I think, okay, this is really cool to apply that right now, because I know there's more people like me, a little bit autistic, especially in the IT branch, that need that, right? And
Mm.
when you combine that, like the personal story that really feels, that's really physically felt, and then you go a whole way with your organizational
Mm.
purpose, because
Yeah.
that's not just fueled because it sounds good, but because it's really a felt purpose, right? It's really embodied.
Yeah. 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 I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. One yeah, one teacher that I like said that that you go from you start out life as a walking question, and then at some point you become a walking answer, and that sounds
Yeah.
kind of similar.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool. But I think so. And I think that gives purpose to every phase in your life. It's like, just being an adventurer when you're young, and being a sage when you're old. I think
Mm.
that's really nice to have that. And I think, and that's also, we were talking about, the society. Sometimes there's like this emphasis on youth and youth only, because that's the only valuable thing there is, and
Mm.
that's not okay either.
No.
I think we should, have everybody engaged, otherwise it's not going to work. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I have the same thing actually. I feel like there's a little bit too much of the dismissiveness to the older generation
Right.
in our culture, and there's so much wisdom in age that yeah you don't
Right.
and it's a tension because we're evolving so fast. Like there's much needed values in the youth, because because they've been educated in a certain way and the latest understanding and stuff, but then at the same time you have this wisdom from older people that you miss.
Yeah, yeah. I have the privilege of having kids growing up, and they're all teenagers. Well, no, not all teenagers. One teenager actually, and two guys above 20. And
Mm.
yeah, I see them. I'm really proud of them and see them do stuff. But at some point, they get hit by life too, right? And they
Yeah.
sit down with their dad and with their mom, of course,
Yeah.
also, and they talk about the experience that you have. They come and ask for it, and I
Yeah.
think that, yeah, everybody should have that once in a while, not all the time, because that's like silly. uh, but once in a while you need that guidance from somebody that has seen more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
everything as well. That's the
Yeah.
problem, right? If you claim to know everything, that's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, and that's in the model too, is like to just keep that playfulness, no matter that you're a sage.
Yeah, I
that
love that.
that that
Yeah,
is really, that's really cool.
I think I love that. I think that's great. Because I think that yeah, it can, because this is something that I kind of grapple with a little bit, is, being the space of like um thinking on what is the deeper why behind, what we're doing. And I think I can get quite conceptual, and it can get quite serious. It can get very serious very quickly, like,
Yeah,
especially think that you start thinking about world problems. And
yeah,
but it's nice that in your model you come back to play. Like, play is the foundation, and then
yeah.
it comes
If
from.
you lose play, you lose everything,
Yeah,
is my stance, right?
that's great. I think that's great, 'cause it's almost, I can see that in my company as well, as like, thinking about the purpose. And on one side, I've put this um quite high-minded conceptual purpose of like bringing things the world needs more of, which I
Hmm.
think is fine, and I like it as a flag. But then on the other side of like what happens in our day-to-day company, and the real meaning of the company is like, it's I don't know, it's all about play, and it's something much more
Right.
grounded.
Yeah.
It's just the play and the vibe, and like the connection between people, and there's this sort of spontaneous um um like fun
Right.
nature, which is also,
Right.
I notice, is very seductive to people around the company as well, and people notice it, and then they want to, join in. I think that's kind
Who
of.
doesn't want to play, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. I think that's really in the driving seat, rather than this like high-minded ideal
Right.
that I put there.
Yeah. It's really the other way around. You
Yeah.
discover, in Dutch, we don't say meaning or purpose. We say zingeving, meaning you give a meaning to stuff.
Mm,
It's like, you have to do it yourself, and I think it's a playful business of
mm,
discovery,
yeah,
and it's not like, let's sit down and spend a lot of hours writing stuff down. It
yeah,
doesn't work that way,
yeah, yeah,
and it really has to be embodied, like I said, like from that playful area. If you're just very conceptual about it and abstract, it's never gonna live, right?
yeah. Exactly. Because yeah,
Yeah.
because then you're I guess you're just engaging on the level of the mind, but you're not getting
Right.
anywhere
Yeah.
deeper. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And it doesn't convey very well on paper or on the web, if it's not, but that's more your job. If you
Yeah,
don't see that playfulness, right?
yeah,
If Yeah,
yeah.
that's right.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's
Cool.
great. What would you like to talk about?
Well, I always like to talk about the other side, because this is very positive, right?
Yeah.
And the pitfalls are all around us, is getting triggered, right? We
Yeah,
talked about that earlier, but it's, I think we can emphasize that a little bit
yeah,
more.
yeah,
And there's so much triggers out there that, despite our good intentions, that just uh, get us in a stressful place,
yeah.
and we're starting to behave like, we regret that afterwards. But everybody has that,
Mm,
and I think that's very interesting. And if I talk about like being conscious about it, about your own development, you have to know these things, right, to recognize them when they happen to you,
mm.
and you can pause and take a break, or say you're sorry, and then start over again, because that's really, I think that's the big discovery I had. It's not like world changing. Oh, my dog is gonna make sounds because he wants something.
Right. He's got something to say.
Okay, goed. Oké, ga maar even liggen daar.
He's got some. He's got something to say about triggering. Clearly.
Yeah, he's triggering.
Yeah.
Okay.
Trouble
Okay,
in paradise over there.
Yeah. Right. And And that's really interesting to know these triggers, is like what does happen with all of us. And I think that's really interesting too, is we're all wired in the same way, and we're all, you know, responding in the same way to these triggers. And I think what the most important thing is, I found out, was that you can't help being triggered
Yeah.
because it's wired that way. So you
Yeah.
get triggered and you have to deal with that. And being effective doesn't mean getting these triggers out of the way, but how do you go about them, and
Mm.
how do you handle them?
Yeah.
And of course, when you get experienced, you switch, you shifts quicker,
Yeah.
and but I think that's happening to everybody all the time, and that's good to know that there is no people are all triggered in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I think that's really important to know. If we don't take care of ourselves and each other in that, and we just pile up the triggers, nothing good comes from it.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. And how, because I guess we touched on this before our call, but how does holocracy help with this triggering issue? Um,
yeah, it's like the holacracy, you know, like the self-management part
yeah.
is really important there, because you know, we see our bosses and our managers, we start to see them as predators
Mm.
who want something else than you. They want to kill us and we want to live, right?
Yeah.
And they're not always aligned with our goals, and that our brain recognizes that as a, you know, as a predator.
Mm.
It's more of a heuristic than a real radar for a predator. We're not
Yeah.
looking for a wolf or a bear. It's more a network that just is triggered, like, oh shit. And then as an effect of this particular trigger, there's a predator, we start to have a laser focus on the
Mm.
predator,
Yeah.
and there's nothing else but this danger out
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
the only thing we can talk about is that terrible boss that we have,
Yeah.
and everything that happens to us is because of him or her. And I've done it, and I've heard it, and I've seen it
Mm.
happen so many times, like, wow, we're spending so much time, you know, gossiping about the boss or
Mm.
venting our frustration. That is really ineffective. And
Yeah.
before I knew what it was. And I think it's really good to be aware. That's an example of a trigger, right? And
Mm.
it's really good to be aware of those triggers, and not having a boss around makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I listened to Frederick Laloux. He's got like a video series now as well. Like I think
Right.
it's something about insights for the way or something. So more insights on how to transition to this teal organization. And he mentions that there's almost like quite often in the transition there's this from traditional organization to the self-management, there's this period where sort of all hell breaks loose,
Right.
and that seems to maybe link up with what you're saying about triggering, essentially, because I guess if you have those triggers which are or those tensions which are traditionally just focused on one or a few areas, so the boss or bosses,
Yeah.
I guess they can play out in the structures. It's almost like having scapegoats. You have scapegoats where you can put your frustration,
Right.
like
Right.
they go there.
Yeah.
But I guess when you remove those scapegoats, then the tension has to go somewhere, right? And then
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's really interesting, because what I describe in the white paper that is connected to this startup
Mm,
is that there is an effective way that you can operate within the fear part, right?
right.
And it's sort of effective. You do what you know. You fall in line with the purpose of the company, because it's the company you work for, and you do your part. You don't second guess it. It's not your purpose, but you do it
Yeah.
anyway. and you connect a sort of life and death importance to that. Like, I can't stop working because the tasks aren't done yet. So you get stressed. So that's the first trigger. And the second trigger is, but that is good in a way that a lot of stuff gets done, right? If it's not too bad, a lot of stuff gets done. And then there's this boss that tells everybody what to do because he's boss, and everybody listens to that. In a way, that's alignment, and that's good. I mean, who doesn't want that, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the third level where you get rid of your own values in order to just be in the group, and you don't give feedback to each other, and that's really, to move forward, that's really quick because you don't have to spend time there, right? So it's effective in a way, but interesting enough, and there's two more, but interesting enough is that has an effect, but the optimal effect is not that. It's just, it works and kind of works, and a lot of companies start to depend on it because they're not sure if anything else will work, and they have like stakeholders, and if they have shareholders, like they want to have return on their investment. They want to make sure somebody is bossing somebody around to make it happen, right? If you have that in place, you can't transition from one thing to another, and that's why hell breaks loose. If some people start to trust to be playful and open, and some are still here, that's not okay, because then you feel like your trust is really violated, and that's really a vulnerable place. That transition is really vulnerable then. I can only imagine that would work that way, and that's what we realized starting this company, that like starting Holocracy from scratch is so much easier than from an existing company. It is. But you don't have that freedom.
Everyone on the same page, right?
Or not come aboard.
Exactly. I mean, we started Holacracy not at the start, but only a couple of years into our company, and we're not very big and everything. So it was, in that sense, it was not too difficult. It's more in the sense that we work with freelancers and then proper like kind of core team members. So then it's that you have a mismatch between how invested people are, and then
that's the engagement level, right? That's the difference there. That makes sense. Cool.
Cool.